Everybody? Thank you for tuning in to the NFL Draft Show. My name is Dan Kornhauser.
And I'm Sam Teets.
And thank you guys for tuning in as we go on another adventure into the world of the NFL Draft and all things football. And even though the NFL Draft is a few weeks away and there's pro days going on and stuff like that, we've already talked about the scouting combine, but it is free agency. And even though all these guys are signing from team to team, getting traded from team to team, there's no rookies or anything like that going on right now. But that doesn't mean that these moves don't have an impact on the NFL draft, on these team needs, on who these teams are going to be scouting, and so on and so forth. So we're going to dive into the first couple days of the NFL's legal tampering window of free agency that has begun. We are in day 2. I believe the actual NFL New Year begins Wednesday at 4 p.m. So everything, all these signings, all these trades, everything that's going on is going to be made official at 4 o'clock Eastern Standard Time tomorrow, Wednesday. So let's dive right in, man, because there's a lot going on, a flurry of activities. There's still some big names on the board. But let's start breaking it down. Let's throw some teams out there that have made some major moves thus far this tampering window and how those affect their plans. So let's start with the Pittsburgh Steelers. I don't want to wait any longer. I've been on the edge of my seat since yesterday, waiting for this conversation. I am so excited. And Alex Segura with a wonderful, wonderful comment early, surely. And he wants to let us know that who gives a shit? All the games are rigged. I don't know if you're a Bengals fan or possibly a Bills fan, but either way, I hope you're wrong, Alex. But thank you for tuning in. So let's start with the Steelers. Sam, you are our resident Steelers fan here, and we follow each other on Twitter, and I have seen some of your comments to some of these moves, and I'm so excited. The floor is yours, sir.
All right, so my initial reaction to signing Mitchell Trubisky was one of complete and utter terror. So I have a lot of friends who are Giants fans. I live in New Jersey. I have a lot of friends who are Giants fans. There was all these rumors linking Trubisky to the Giants. And I was actually actively making fun of some of my friends about the fact they might get Mitchell Trubisky and Daniel Jones in your quarterback room. And instead, it's Mitchell Trubisky and Mason Rudolph in my quarterback room. So I was not originally very thrilled about that. But the more I sit back and think about it, I'm okay with this, I guess. Okay is the right way to say it. I'm not thrilled. Okay. I'm not excited. But I'm not too upset by it, considering it's saying it's $14.5 million deal over 2 years. I'm assuming they can get out after year 1 pretty easily. It is pretty incentive heavy, where it can get up to the mid-20s in terms of contract money, mid-$20 million if he performs well and if he's a starter and hits certain incentives. So it's performance-based for the most part. I feel fairly good about the contract, and it gives Pittsburgh the opportunity to win, whether it's a good thing or not, win 7 to 10 games next year with Mitchell Trubisky at quarterback and maybe sneak into the back end of the playoffs. I don't know. It's a decent bridge-level contract, though, and it's a decent quarterback if he's a bridge-level QB. Not a guy I would classify as a star by any means, but I suppose this is better than some of the things they could have done. I'm just sitting still and letting Mason Rudolph run the show. That would have been worse, but I don't know. This does not take Pittsburgh out of the QB market, which scares me. They're still likely to try to draft one if the opportunity presents itself. If Malik Willis falls to whatever level, then it's just – if Malik Willis falls to Pittsburgh, where it comes within 5 picks of Pittsburgh might want to try to trade up to get him. It's just – I don't like the QBs in this class. I really wish they almost paid him a little bit more. That way you couldn't afford to draft a QB. But I think Pittsburgh's definitely still in the running for a quarterback at this time.
Now – the quarterback position is one that everyone's paying attention to. It doesn't matter if your team is a quarterback or not. Everyone's looking at the quarterback position this offseason. There's already been a lot of movement on that front. There's going to be more movement on that front. And just looking at some of the quarterbacks who are already off the board just a couple of days into this legal tampering window, aside from Mitch Trubisky, who, like you said, signed that 2-year deal with the Pittsburgh Steelers, Teddy Bridgewater signed a 1-year, $6.5 million deal with the Dolphins to be Tua's backup and probably take the field when Tua inevitably gets hurt. Tyrod Taylor today, literally like an hour or two ago or something like that, signed a 2-year, $17 million deal with the New York Giants. He's actually getting more than Mitchell Trubisky, which is interesting. And he's going to be Dan Jones's backup, and probably same thing as with Bridgewater, take over for him when he inevitably gets hurt. Colt McCoy re-signed with the Cardinals, Brian Hoyer, and then we're going down to no man's land. Jameis Winston, Marcus Mariota, still on the board. To a lesser extent, Jacoby Brissett, Andy Dalton, Ryan Fitzmagic, and then a bunch of backups and retreads that are not worth mentioning. So we've seen the Steelers sign a quarterback. Teddy's off the board. Tyrod Taylor's off the board. So the Giants got their backups, top two quarterbacks. Dolphins got their top two. Steelers, like you're adding another piece. Jameis Winston, Mariota. Who's next to sign?
Deshaun Watson. I think the Deshaun Watson trade gets done first before either of these guys signs. Because you think about the teams that need quarterbacks or might be willing to take a shot on a QB. Teams like both Carolina. I don't know if Carolina could afford it just to sign their guy outright because of the Sam Darnold contract. But you have Carolina in the mix. You got New Orleans in the mix. New Orleans would be the favorite, I think, to re-sign Jameis Winston if they were not currently bidding for Deshaun Watson. Mm-hmm. So you have some teams in that scenario where it kind of all hinges on when Deshaun decides to make his move, because everyone would prefer Deshaun Watson to, despite all the 20-plus civil lawsuits he's still currently facing, everyone would prefer him to Marcus Mariota or Jameis Winston from a football standpoint. And the NFL has made that quite clear with the number of teams that are actively bidding on him. And even beyond that point, I don't know where Jimmy Garoppolo stands in this whole situation. Mm-hmm. And there are some teams that might view Jimmy Garoppolo as a preferable piece to someone like Marcus Mariota. So it'll be interesting to see how the trade market plays out and still potentially affects these remaining free agent quarterbacks. I really don't think Jameis Winston signs anywhere until we know where Deshaun Watson is playing in 2022.
All right, so Winston and Mariota are on the back burner. Jimmy, the rumors are swirling that Jimmy's a favorite to land in Indianapolis, which I think would be a perfect fit for a guy like Jimmy Garoppolo. The definition of what you see is what you get kind of a thing with this guy. I have very strong feelings about Jimmy that I've talked about all year, but we won't get into that here. And you mentioned the Panthers. They have right now about $31 million in cap space. They have been making a bunch of moves, restructuring guys, releasing guys, and they've been making moves to free up cap space, presumably to add Watson. And I think Carolina's a front runner to get Watson. They were the front runner, I think, last for Miami. With Miami out the window, I know Deshaun Watson has a relationship with New Orleans and I think Mickey Loomis and whatever. I think there's some history there. And I know reports have been that he has some interest in joining the New Orleans Saints. They are still in cap hell, and they've done tons of restructuring of literally anyone on that team with a contract. They pretty much restructured everybody. And they're still $2 million, $3 million in the hole right now, give or take. It's ugly. So, and they don't have this. They don't have the kind of capital that the Panthers have. I mean, yeah, the Panthers don't have that many picks. They don't have a second from the Darnold trade, like you mentioned, but at least they have a higher pick this year.
Yeah, at least they have the 6th overall pick.
I've also seen rumors that they're talking about potentially moving McCaffrey, stud running back. I'm not buying it. I think that would be foolish if you're trying to get a Deshaun Watson. They're not hurting for cap space, so I don't see a reason to do it. You got Watson, you got McCaffrey, you've got 2 legit wide receiver options and Moore. Moore and
Robbie Anderson.
Robbie Anderson, yep. And you even got Terrence Marshall, who they drafted last year. So you got 3 good receivers. You got a good running back. You have Watson. Build up the O-line a little bit, see what you could pull, and then go from there. But there's been all kinds of other moves. So finish up with the Pittsburgh Steelers. They have made a few other signings. How do you feel overall thus far about what Pittsburgh has done outside of the quarterback position? Because they've made some other nice moves.
I'll say a B, actually, outside of the quarterback position. I do enjoy what they've done today. stars yesterday, they brought back Miles Kilbrew. Maybe it was a couple days ago. They brought back Miles Kilbrew, a really good special teamer on a 2-year contract. But then today, you get James Daniels on a 3-year contract from the Chicago Bears for under $10 million a year. This is a guy who's played both guard spots and played center a little bit as well. He's 24 years old. He's 4 years into his NFL career. And he's a solid player. I'm really excited for this. I think this guy has a chance to be the best player on our offensive line next year. And we're paying him under $10 million per year for 3 years. And he's still going to be 27 years old when that contract comes up. So I feel really good about that. And then getting Levi Wallace from the Buffalo Bills. I have a friend who's pretty into the Buffalo Bills. He runs the Locked On Bills podcast. And he's warned me about it, cautioned me about Levi Wallace. Wallace benefited quite a bit from playing in that Bills defense that had 2 really good safeties. Pittsburgh does have Minkah Fitzpatrick there, looking for someone else at the other safety spot with Terrell Edmonds in free agency. But Levi Wallace, I think, could be a solid cornerback too, especially for the money he's getting paid. I think he's getting paid $4 million per year. That is really good money for a guy who's been a 4 or 3-year star with the Buffalo Bills and been a solid player, not a good player. They've always tried to replace him, but a solid player in the NFL for $4 million a year on a team that doesn't have anyone to replace Joe Hayden or Ahkello Witherspoon yet. I'll take that. That's a good contract for a team that doesn't have a ton of cap space.
So now I'm looking at Pittsburgh's current space. You guys are sitting at about, let's say, 16, 17 mil left in cap space, give or take. Do you see these guys making any more major moves in free agency as of now? And with the moves they've made thus far, how do you think these moves affect Pittsburgh's outlook on the NFL draft?
As much as I hate to say it, I don't think they're going to go offensive line in the first round. It would be hard pressed for me to see how they could do that, considering they've gone out. They added someone who didn't talk about, Mason Cole, a center from the Minnesota Vikings. They brought him in yesterday. You got James Daniels today. They brought back Chuck's Oko. So I'm going to mispronounce his name, so I'm just going to do the last name, Okorafor, because I know I mess his first name up all the time. They brought him back to play right tackle. You already have Dan Moore Jr. at left tackle. You got Kevin Dotson, presumably playing left guard. And that kind of floats Kendrick Green somewhere in the ether, somewhere in the middle. But you have now 6 offensive linemen that it seems the front office feels comfortable with. Now, do the fans feel comfortable with it? No. Do I feel comfortable with it? Absolutely not. Well, I don't think they're going to take Zion Johnson, the guy who I would love to see go off the board to Pittsburgh in the first round. I have a hard time believing they're going to do that when they already have so many guys in place who look like they're going to be starters next year. So I think it does take Pittsburgh out of the offensive line market, at least early in the draft. After that, I really don't know. Getting Levi Wallace is interesting, but right now he would really be Pittsburgh's best corner, and you cannot possibly roll into next season that way. It just cannot happen. So I think Pittsburgh has to go and find a way to get another corner. You got Levi Wallace, Cameron Sutton on the roster right now. You have to get another corner. I think that becomes what you're looking at now in the first round, if not a quarterback.
I mean, their offensive line is ugly, dude. I know you make perfect sense when you say they've added a lot of pieces in the first couple of days. They have guys that they like carrying over. They re-signed Okorafor.
Okorafor, I think is his last name, but yeah. They gave him over $10 million a year. It doesn't make sense to me. I don't know why. It's bad. It's the wrong decision. Objectively, the wrong decision, but they did it. And something tells me this front office is very stubborn with this kind of stuff. So the fact they handed out all this free agent money to these guys tells me they're going to roll with this group going forward.
So right now, your starting offensive line could very well be Kendrick Green at center, James Daniels and Mason Cole at guard, unless Kevin Dotson wins the job, and then Okorafor and Dan Moore at tackle. And I just want to tell you that's gross.
Yeah. The only change I think what's going to happen, I think Kevin Dotson's going to win one of the guard spots. I think they'll probably play Mason Cole at center. Kendrick Green, like I said, I really don't know. I mean, he can't play center after what he did last year. He was a guard a lot of times in college. Maybe he'll play there. I don't know. But chances are someone's going to get hurt anyways. Like Dotson's been hurt pretty frequently. So I think someone's going to get hurt anyways, and Green's going to get an opportunity to play. It's just a question of when.
I mean, you can ask Joe Burrow and Cincy fans the importance of an offensive line. And speaking of which, one of our favorite resident fans here, Joseph Michael. What's up, Joe? He says, Sam, WTF, man? You're a Schittsburg fan, SMH, with a very
See the
disappointed
Bengals fans. I mean, my good pastors cry Bengals fans checking in here.
Yo, gotta show some love, man. Thank you, Joe, for chiming in. And boom. Thomas R. What up, guys? What up, Tom? Thanks for tuning in, buddy. If you have any questions, if you want to talk about something, you have any positional questions, any players you want to hear about, let us know. But since Joseph Michael chimed in, I think it would be fair to go to the Bengals next, show some love there. But before we do, I want to remind you guys that we are brought to you by betting.net, and it is your best bet for sportsbook and casino sites. So head on over to betting.net. Now, looking at the Cincinnati Bengals, went to the Super Bowl. Everybody knew what they needed coming in. It was offensive line, and offensive line. It's very, very simple. Protect your superstar. They signed a couple of interesting free agent options. Guard Alex Kappa from Tampa Bay to a 4-year, $40 million contract. And they brought in Ted Karras over on a 3-year, $18 million contract. Now, these are upgrades. Absolute upgrades on the inside for the Bengals. Both of these guys will start pending injury. And they're going to be better. They're going to be better than they were. But I don't know how much better. And I guess some improvement still counts as improvement. But I thought with the amount of cap space that they had coming into this offseason, that they would go after a big fish, go after tearing up somebody like that, make a trade for somebody. I'm sure there's guys out there. Go to the Detroit Lions if they're interested in taking, Neil or Ekoanyu up top. Then, maybe they might be interested in trading Taylor Decker with his fat cap hit and a couple of years left on his contract. Have two young studs at tackle. It's who knows? Do something creative, but it's a good start. But I think they could have done better.
Yeah, I think they could have done a little bit better, but frankly, given some of the contracts they got handed out to the offensive linemen who are towards the top of the board, someone like a Joe Noteboom who hasn't really started full time, but he got 3 years, $40 million. If that's what you're going up against, if that's the tackle market, then I can understand why you would want to save some money there and go into your offensive line first, and then kind of address things later on through the draft or see what free agents are left after the first couple of days and go forward from there. Although I do think getting someone like Connor Williams from the Dallas Cowboys, who only got a 2-year, $14 million deal, that's something I would have probably been on if I was them trying to get a guy like that kind of contract. But Kappa is a pretty good player. Kappa is going to create a lot of movement in the running game for them. They love to run the ball in first down for some reason. So I think they're going to get some movement up front. And getting Ted Karras from, I think he was in Miami previously. I know he spent quite a bit of time in New England. This is a guy who was versatile enough to play both center and guard. So you can get a lot of mix and match pairs on the offensive line there. And he's a good contract as well. That's a good contract for them to get him at that price. So you're really addressing your interior offensive line here. You have Jonah Williams at left tackle. And you have Jackson Carmer kind of sitting there on the back end of your roster. Same to with Kendrick Green a little bit. A guy who's going into now his second year, and you really got to figure out what you're doing with this guy. So now Jackson Carmer supposedly came in a little overweight last training camp. We'll see if that's a problem again this year. I do think he can be a good guard in the NFL from what I know from his time in Clemson, because I have to watch him firsthand. I do think he can play guard in the NFL. It's just kind of getting him to be in the physical shape to do that. But right tackle right now is going to be probably their focus going forward, whether it be through the draft or whatever you do to get that position filled, because Riley Reef is gone, and what we saw in the Super Bowl was ugly.
It was disgusting what we saw in the Super Bowl, and both Karras and Kappa both graded pretty well on PFF. Kappa was 18th out of 82 guards graded, and Karras was 15th overall. So that's great, and that sounds good. That looks good. Like I said, it's an improvement. But they absolutely, positively have to add a starting offensive tackle. They cannot go in get Prince at right tackle again. He was, if not the worst, one of the worst starting offensive tackles in the NFL. An absolute turnstile, just not good. They just can't do it. It's unacceptable. They're going to get that. So they need to add another tackle. Trey Hopkins is okay at center, but he even wasn't anything special. If they could add a late round center as well, all the more better. We saw the Kansas City Chiefs rebuild their offensive line in one off season with a bunch of savvy moves, a big free agent signing, a big trade, draft picks. It can be done. Cincinnati still has
The Chargers
wiggle.
did it too.
Mm-hmm. Cincinnati still has the wiggle room. 21 million in cap space. Keep making these moves.
Yeah, that's the blueprint. Follow what the Chargers did, follow what the Chiefs did to make this happen. We do have some questions, though, coming into our chat.
That we do. Let me throw one up there. This one is from Thomas R. He asks, how do you think Carson Wentz will perform in Washington? Is it an upgrade from Taylor Heineke? And I'm going to say yes, it is an absolute upgrade. I don't think he's going to lead them to a Super Bowl unless he recaptures his MVP form before he injured his knee and it all came tumbling down. But he looks as close to an Alex Smith type quarterback than they've had since Alex Smith was there doing his thing. And as long as he keeps his turnovers down, he'll automatically be better than Taylor Heineke. The man threw 15 picks last year, 20 touchdowns. Can't do it. Can't do it at all. Wentz threw, I think, only 7 this past season, 3,500 yards or whatever it is. What he did in Indy, and this team's defense gets back to the level that they should be with all those first-round picks on the defensive line and the potential that unit has, this team could make moves in a very disappointing division. The Giants are butt. I don't trust Philadelphia at all, and I don't trust Dallas. Dallas is a little bit of drama away from going 9-8, and Wade Phillips getting fired. So that's a very winnable division. I think it was a great move. I'm a little disappointed that Washington didn't aim higher because there were, in my opinion, some much more attractive options, but it's better than Taylor Heineke.
Yeah, Dallas, if they don't make the playoffs this year or if they get booted in the first round, Mike McCarthy is absolutely going to be gone. There's no way they can potentially keep him after that. And Washington, they have some weapons. They have Terry McLaurin. They have Curtis Samuel coming back from injury. De'Ami Brown, who I liked last year, and they got him in the draft. Antonio Gibson coming out of the backfield. Mm-hmm. I'd be a little concerned about the offensive line and what free agency is going to do to that unit. Although I do think Sam Cosmi looked pretty good in limited snaps last year. He'll be stepping up in his second year in the NFL and maybe helping that unit quite a bit. So I think this is going to be definitely an upgrade. I think the situation is not as good as it was in Indianapolis per se. Maybe better receivers than Washington, but definitely not a Jonathan Taylor kind of player behind Quentin Nelson, that whole entire offensive line they have down there in Indy. I still think this is going to be a big upgrade for Washington. And like you said, in a weak division where Dallas is bleeding a lot right now in free agency and they're just kind of messing themselves up on their own, but without really any temptation by other teams, Washington certainly has a shot here at not just making the playoffs, but also winning the division.
And the good thing is now with Wentz, so they don't have to use their first-round pick on a quarterback. They could take the best player available, and they could look to address any one of their other needs. I mean, just going up and down, if they wanted to add, I don't know, another receiver, which Scary Terry needs help. He needs help. I know they signed Samuel from Carolina last offseason, but he did what he does. He got hurt, and he was inconsistent, never found his footing. I think wide receivers in play for Washington now in the first round. I think corners in play. They might surprise and trade back and stack up some more picks. Maybe take one of those old linemen or something like that. But they now have options, and if there's one thing that NFL teams covet is having options. And we'll go back to Indianapolis in a hot second. But Joseph Michael says, let CJ go though. So now we need a tight end to fill that void. Mike Brown will head into the season under the cap. He is a terrible owner. I know how much Bengals fans hate Mike Brown. He's your owner, he's your general manager, and he's the bane of their existence. And more often than not, he's made questionable moves. But get a guy like Joe Burrow, makes everybody look better.
He is notoriously cheap. They have a very small scouting department there. They actually spent big in free agency over the past couple of years, which is somewhat surprising. And they got BJ Hill back this year, which I think was a good addition at about $10 million per year. But I wouldn't expect them to make too many more moves this offseason, which is going to be somewhat disappointing for Bengals fans because you could need another corner. You could use some help at right tackle, like I said. But it looks like they might be coming down to just using the draft as their motive for or is their main means of getting new players into the room?
Yeah, they did lose CJ Uzoma. That's what he was alluding to. Uzoma signed with the New York Jets. I want to say if not today, then yesterday. So they'll miss him. Darius Phillips also left the Bengals as a free agent, cornerback. Didn't play a lot, but he went to the Raiders as a free agent. Now, in one of our recent mock drafts here, right here on this show, I had Trey McBride going to the Bengals, and I said, why not? They got a young quarterback. They need a target in the middle of the field, and I knew CJ was a free agent, so I figured if he left, that would be a great option. And Trey McBride could very well be their pick there if they don't see an offensive tackle that they like. And one last comment, but I don't recall what this is referring to, but he said both Super Bowl champs as well. That's probably something we were talking about earlier. But I want to go back to Indianapolis for a hot second. Before we do, I want to remind you guys that your top sportsbook comparison site is betting.net, and betting.net offers extensive reviews on the best sportsbooks out there. So head on over to betting.net. Now, the Indianapolis Colts. I do want to go back and talk about them a little bit. I know a lot of viewers and fans of the Grueling Truth come from the Midwest area, and I Mike is in that area, right on the border and everything like that of Indiana and Ohio. And I know Steve Risley is a huge Colts fan. He picked Indianapolis pretty much every week on our NFL Wednesday Pick'em show from like the 6th or 7th week of the season. Picked Indianapolis every week, no matter who the opponent was, no matter the injury report, no matter the line. He picked Indianapolis flat out every single week. And more often than not, it worked out for him. But let's talk about Indy real quick, because when I look at them, they're a team that's got $62 million in cap space. And all they've done thus far has re-signed a bunch of their own players, which is not a bad deal. They brought back a couple of guys, but they got rid of Wentz. They've got a gaping hole at quarterback, and they're just sitting on their hands right now. I know Colts fans are probably disgusted. They're probably wondering what's going on. And honestly, I'm looking at their free agents on this team. There's really no one that stands out to me as someone that you're like, oh man, we got to have them, that they haven't already re-signed. So where do you think they go from here? Some of the big names in free agency are still available. What do you think Indianapolis is thinking at this point, and what do you think they're looking at when it comes to the draft, seeing all these players come off the board already?
The three positions to me I think they really need to focus on are cornerback currently. So they do have Kenny Moore. They do have Rock Ya-Sin. But you're losing Xavier Rhodes, who's been pretty consistent for you during his time with the team. I'm looking at left tackle where Eric Fisher's going away. Sam Tevye as well. I'm going to look at wide receiver where Tua Hilton and Zach Pascal are both gone as well. And you look at that unit, you really don't have much back there. It's pretty much Michael Pittman Jr. and a bunch of spare parts at this point. And the other thing I would look at, maybe edge rushers. Kwity Paye obviously came in last year, had a decent but not great rookie season. You're going to need some other help with the defensive end spots. I know we got one guy coming back because they drafted last year, I think in the second round, who had torn his Achilles, I want to say, towards the end of the season or his workout, so he wasn't going to be able to play at all during his rookie year. But I would still consider looking at edge rusher, either in free agency or through the draft. We're just talking about free agency right now. I mean, if you have that much money, you need a left tackle. Teron Armstead is still out there. And he's had injury issues during his time with the Saints, but he is still a top 5 tackle or top 5 left tackle in the NFL when healthy. So you really want to play with that money. You really want to throw it around. I would look at trying to get Teron Armstead in the building right now. As far as wide receiver goes, I'm not really sure. Christian Kirk has kind of flipped the market on its head a little bit for wide receiver. There have been some receiver-friendly deals out there, but I don't know at this point if Allen Robinson, coming off a bad year in Chicago, if he asks for $20+ million, I'm not sure I'm going to give it to him.
Yeah, that's gross. Now, the good thing for Indy is that there are still some decent wide receivers available. I think they're screwed. And all these teams, the entire NFL is screwed. If you need an offensive lineman and you're looking at the free agent market, you're disgusted. Because at offensive tackle, Armstead, who has own injury concerns and questions throughout his career, even though he's an all-pro tackle when healthy. After him, there's literally nobody. You got old ass Dwayne Brown, who, I mean, he might be serviceable for a year, but you're going to be right back at the position next year trying to find his replacement. And then after that, it's ugly. It's a bunch of veteran guys, nobody who stands out, anything special. Morgan Moses, who's right tackle, Eric Fisher, if you want to bring him back, Riley Reef, who has experience at left tackle from Detroit, his days in Detroit, and I think he played left tackle for Minnesota as well. Just wildly mediocre. And when you're looking at the interior, it ain't much better. The top like 6 or 7 guards are off the board. The top few centers are off the board. Most of them re-signed with their old teams. You're looking at Bradley Bozeman and Matt Paradis right now as your top centers probably. Trey Turner, Quentin Spain, maybe Darrell Williams at guard, Andrew Norwell, who did not work out at all for Jacksonville when he signed with them. It's just gross. So if you need an offensive lineman, it's Armstead or bust. And the good thing for Indy, at least there's wide receiver options still. At least they still have Allen Robinson's out there, who's a legit wide receiver one when he's healthy and fully engaged. Last year was a bit of a wash because the team sucked, the quarterback sucked, the head coach and the offensive system sucked, and he just wasn't quite right for one reason or another. But there's him, Juju Smith-Schuster, Odell Beckham Jr., but he's probably going back to L.A. Antonio Brown's a free agent, but after his insane blow-up at the end of the year with Tampa Bay, it remains to be seen if anyone's really going to sign him. He's getting old. Other than that, it's a bunch of wide receiver 2, wide receiver 3 guys. Will Fuller, Marcus Valdez-Scantling, if you want to take a swing. Maybe they bring back T.Y. Hilton. Pineapples. Grossed out. Everything that I just said. But there's options. Oh, and Joseph Michael. Agunjobi, big D tackle, is gone as well. I'm gonna have to check if he misspelled that because I'm just terrible with names. I don't know.
He did.
Agunjobi, he spelled it right. Good job. I'm sorry for questioning you. Although it's O-G-U-N. O-G-U-N.
Close enough for that kind of spelling.
Close enough.
But yeah, he was huge for them. He was huge for them. Part of the big rotation they had inside with DJ Reader, Ogunjobi, and then BJ Hill, who they brought back. That was really, I think, the strength of their defense. They got overlooked throughout the entire year, was having those 3 guys rotating around in the middle. You couldn't run against them on the interior. And they still got BJ Hill back, so I think they'll be fine. Ogunjobi's coming off an injury anyways. But definitely not having that 3-man depth. I mean, you're probably going to turn to Tyler Shelvin, who you drafted last year, but unproven rookie from the mid-round selection. You don't know if he's going to be able to work out and replace the guy in that 3-man rotation on the interior.
Now, we've done Cincinnati, we've done Indianapolis, we've done Pittsburgh. I do want to talk about, I'm in New York, so I do want to talk a little bit about the New York teams, the local teams here, the Jets, the Giants, Buffalo, to a lesser extent, even though they're the only team literally in New York. They're always like, the redheaded stepchild. They're always looked at as like, Buffalo's in New York, but they're not New York. It's Buffalo. It's meh. They make wings. They don't play football. But that being said, they still count. And they are a Super Bowl contender. We'll touch on them in a hot second. But with the New York teams, the Jets have made a ton of moves. Not anything crazy. They're not bringing any superstars or anything like that, but they have signed a lot of really quality players and guys who will make their roster a lot better. So they've re-signed a few of their own. They brought back LaMarcus Joyner, Tevin Coleman at running back, Connor McDermott, and they re-signed Braxton Berrios today to a really nice deal, 2 years, $12 million. But they've also signed as free agents Laken Tomlinson, who should start at guard for them, former Detroit Lion, San Francisco 49er. They brought in CJ Uzoma, who, as I mentioned before, the tight end from Cincinnati. They brought in Jordan Whitehead, safety from Tampa Bay, 25-year-old safety, young piece, will probably be a starter in that secondary. And DJ Reed Jr., who they signed to a 3-year, $33 million deal. That is a little rich for my blood when looking at a guy like DJ Reed. But that aside, the money questions aside, they signed a lot of good pieces. They're beefing up the roster, and I like the direction that they're headed in. As far as where their needs will lie after making some of these moves, they're set at guard, which is good because that was one of the things on my list that I had. But they still need to address offensive tackle. And I think with these moves, despite the thing added to their secondary, I don't think the secondary can be dismissed. So I think right now, offensive tackle, edge rusher, and secondary are probably their top three needs right now. Wide receivers right there as well. And I think when it comes to the Jets, they're currently picking what, 10th? They've got the 10th overall pick, which I think they got from Seattle. And coincidentally, Seattle picks 9th. But anyway, so they got the 10th pick and they have the 4th pick. At 4, they might be in position to take Ekwonu if he's available, or Neal if Jacksonville doesn't take Aiden Hutchinson. We'll go back to Jacksonville too, because we are definitely going to talk about Jacksonville. It's crazy.
Yeah.
But with the moves the Jets made right now, they're in a good position. How do you feel, at least with the Jets roster, their team needs going into the draft? I think they can still make some moves. They still do have some cap space, or a lot of cap space actually available, about $44 million, give or take, to be exact. So they could very well make some more moves. I don't think they're a team that's going to fall asleep here. Do you agree with me with the team needs on the Jets, or do you think they should maybe go in a different direction early on?
I think wide receiver is going to be a bit of a higher priority than the other spots you mentioned, because you have Corey Davis, you have Elijah Moore, and you're bringing back, like you said, you're bringing back your slot receiver from last year. So you're getting some help there in Berrios, but you really don't have wide receiver 1. You really don't. Corey Davis is an excellent wide receiver 2, and that's about it. And I think Elijah Moore can develop into something really special, but you have to give him time to do that. So I think wide receiver 1 is going to be an issue for them. I don't think they're going to be in play for Allen Robinson. I don't think that's going to really be a shot for them. And after that, there really is not a wide receiver 1 in free agency. So I expect that to be something to look at in the draft. And you can get wide receiver 1s in the second round of the draft. We've seen it before. So I think that could happen. As far as offensive tackle goes, I had someone posed the theory today that if the Jets coaching staff does not love Mekhi Becton, or feels that his weight's going to be a continual issue, and he's going to constantly be dealing with injuries, which there's the possibility he will be. He was only supposed to be out a couple weeks this past year, ended up missing almost the entire season because he had issues rehabbing because of weight, putting on too much weight and not being able to take it off. If this is going to be a continued problem, you might draft the tackle and look to move on from Mekhi Becton before the end of the year. Because George Fant, who played almost 900 snaps for you last year, was a serviceable starter at tackle. I mean, I'll pull his numbers up right now from PFF. He allowed 1 sack and 18 pressures. That's really not that bad on 900 snaps. So if you feel like he can be a starter like that, because he was a high caliber swing tackle before that. If you feel like he can be a starter on one end for you, and you just need a left tackle, and Neal or Ekwonu is sitting there right there for you, and you feel like Mekhi Becton's not a long-term answer, admit your mistake and move on. Don't fall into this sunk cost fallacy that, we have to keep him around because he was a Joe Douglas draft pick and a first-round pick, and he's got all this talent potential. No, if he's a lost cause, just move on. Get as much for him as possible and go for it. So there's a possibility. I think tackle is certainly in play there if you have negative feelings about Mekhi Becton going forward. And like you said, I would still focus on corner and edge rushers still, because this class is loaded with corners and edge rushers, and you can never have enough of those guys. You're one injury away from having one of the worst starting secondaries or one of the worst starting defensive end duos in the NFL at all times, unless you have the depth, and they just don't have the depth right now at either spot. So I would definitely focus on those two positions. If not in the first couple of rounds, then I would definitely put them in the mid-rounds and go after some guys down there.
Yeah, I mean, even if they skip on wide receiver in the first round, because I think the earliest we see a wide receiver is that 10th pick. Maybe Atlanta, because they have literally nothing at the position.
Yeah.
It's pretty much going to be you and me starting on the outside for them this upcoming season. They lost Russell Gage to Tampa Bay. They brought back, I think his last name is Zacchaeus or something like that. I can't pronounce it.
Oh, Zacchaeus? Yeah.
Zacchaeus, yeah. He's their wide receiver 1 right now. And then it's Dan Kornhauser and Sam Teets. That's their depth chart right now at wide receiver. And it's abysmal. Okay. You can't even win Pop Warner football game with that. Okay. Maybe I'm a little insulting us a little bit. But you get the point, all right? They're
it'd be difficult.
Staffed. So maybe the Falcons take the first wide receiver, but the Jets are sitting pretty at number 10 to potentially take whatever receiver they see fit at that spot. Drake London is the guy who's being floated around as the most popular option, and I don't mind that at all because Zach Wilson, I said coming out, Zach Wilson had some Johnny Manziel to him, not the crack-headed partying Johnny Manziel, not money Manziel, but in that he has that scrambling, take a risk type quarterback, gunslinger mentality, if you will. And he it worked for him at BYU his final year, and that's what helped him rocket up boards. But a guy like London would probably be a great fit for the Jets. But if they wait till the second round and they get a Christian Watson or somebody like that at the top of the second round, that would allow them to go offensive line and edge rusher, or take Kyle Hamilton 4th overall if he's on the board. Yeah, you don't want to take a safety that high, but if everyone's saying Hamilton is maybe the best defensive player in the draft, he's probably potentially as high as the 2nd overall, which would be absolutely repulsive if you're a Detroit Lions fan. You probably would want to burn the stadium to the ground if they take a safety 2nd overall a couple of years after taking a corner 3rd overall, and that corner shitting the bed for the last 2 years. But
not that you would know anything about that.
I digress. I'll take a steaming dump on the Lions at some point later on this offseason. For now, we're just going to keep it positive, and we're gonna focus back up here. But before we go on, I want to remind you guys that the Grueling Truth is powered by Betting.net. Betting.net is your best bet for finding the online casino or sportsbook that's right for you. So head on over to Betting.net. There is another football team in New York, and that, of course, is the New York Football Giants. They've re-signed a couple of their own guys, but they did sign John Feliciano, guard that was released by the Bills, and they also signed Tyrod Taylor, as I mentioned earlier, to a 2-year, $17 million deal. They signed a wide receiver. I think they signed Robert Foster or somebody like that. He was a former Bills receiver. That's irrelevant. I just mentioned it just because I know it would piss my friend Bob off. But the Giants are another team, okay? Another team with a lot of needs, and talks about it. They're going to trade Saquon Barkley. What kind of guys they're looking at the top of the draft. Just threatening. But they don't have much cap space, okay? I'm looking at the list right now. They're sitting somewhere in the bottom portion. They are in the red. They've got about negative $6.5 million that they got to make up. So I don't see them being big players in free agency moving forward. I mean, of course, we know the NFL, you can always restructure and do crazy shit, but I don't see them doing anything more. With these moves, minor moves that they've made, where do you think? Do you think that alters drastically what the Giants were thinking going into the draft? Do you think they still have some tricks up their sleeve? Where do you lean with the Giants?
I think the Giants feel pretty good about their interior offensive line right now, based on what they've done so far. Maybe you want to look at center a little bit, because Nick Gates is coming off a pretty serious injury. But you have fixed the guard room essentially. You have Shane Lemieux there already. You got John Feliciano. You signed Mark Glowinski from the Indianapolis Colts. So you have help at guard. You're fine there. Left tackle, you have to believe in Andrew Thomas at this point. You've already kind of pushed your chips in on this situation where you have to believe he's the guy. That just leaves right tackle. So I think right tackle is going to be huge for them. And I believe Andrew Thomas is the type of player who could play right tackle if you felt like you have better fit at left tackle. I don't think you will. But if you did feel that way, then it would make sense to move him to right tackle. So I think offensive tackle. And then on the other end, you have to find some semblance of a pass rush. This defense, and I hate, by the way, their defensive scheme. I absolutely hate it because it does not naturally help you generate any kind of pass rush whatsoever. I hate how Dave Gettleman built this roster because, again, not really – I'm a Pittsburgh Steelers fan. We have led the NFL in sacks like 6 years in a row. So the New York Giants defense and how it's schemed up is just atrocious to me. It's sacrilegious. I would never want to see that never want to see Pittsburgh do that kind of defensive scheme ever or run with the kind of defensive personnel that the Giants have run with. So I think New York really needs to sit down and look at these edge rushers that are on the board and say, this is a very deep edge rusher class. You need to find at least one guy, at least one. I would argue go after two. I know you already got Azeez Ojulari on your roster, but I think you really have a shot to go after two guys here and make a significant difference and completely overhaul your pass rushing group down in the trenches. So I think that will be a focus. And I don't really know. Depending on what scheme you're going to go run, maybe look at the defensive interior a little bit. You already have Dexter Lawrence, who's a really good player. You got Leonard Williams, who has high-end potential, but is probably getting overpaid right now. I might look at that just a little bit, somewhere in the light rounds, and even higher up than that, I would look at corner. There's a real chance that James Bradbury is not on this roster next year, because James Bradbury right now, the cap hit he's going to have is pretty massive for a guy who was really good 2 years ago, but not that good this past year. He's getting overpaid right now. So if you want to save some cap money and start focusing long-term, maybe consider taking a corner pretty high in this draft class and then cutting James Bradbury to save some money.
The James Bradbury cutting is not far-fetched, and it's something that has been floated around on the interwebs since the offseason began, because like you said, he's got a high cap number. He's at over $21 million, give or take $22 million cap hit, which is below Leonard Williams, who's got a $27 million cap hit. Now, if they cut Bradbury, I believe post-June 1, they'll save – oh, no, I'm sorry, pre-June. No, yeah, post. Post-June 1st, they'll save like $13 million if they –
It's a pretty good chunk.
That's a good chunk, man. That'll bring them from in the red, $6 million in the red to, $7 million in the blacks. That's probably a move they're going to have to make if he doesn't restructure. Because his cap of $21 million is unacceptable. I would say Kenny Golladay might be another one who they might approach to restructure, because his $21 million cap hit is also repulsive. I mean, he's a former Lion. I wanted the Lions to bring him back, but
not that price anymore. Not feeling it anymore.
Nah. Even ignoring what happened this past year, where he was injured and whenever he played, he was just absolutely useless. Could not separate. Nothing. That aside, even if you told me he was 100% healthy, I still wouldn't want to pay him this much money. It's gross. And if we're going to be on the topic of wide receivers who are getting paid and it's disgusting, I might as well shift gears and go down south and go to Jacksonville. It's moist, it's sunny, and it's also the place where a bunch of money is being it's raining down there. I know the clouds are clear. The forecast called for clear skies, but let's not be confused. Trent Baalke is making it rain down in Jacksonville. Unfortunately, it's not on anyone that you want to really spend that kind of money on. And when I say these sorts of things, I'm not saying it tongue in cheek, because yuck. Christian Kirk got a big fat contract from Jacksonville. I get why they did it. They need to build around Trevor Lawrence. Yuck. Now, it is a 3-year, $72 million contract. However, in reality, it's probably just a 2-year deal, because it's got an opt-out after the second year. However, if they cut or trade him before the end of next season, they end up with like a $30 million dead cap hit or something like that. It is disgusting. And it was one of the first moves in free agency. It was the first big money deal to be doled out. And I hate it. I hate everything about it. All of it. I don't even care that it's a 2-year out. It's actually a 4-year contract. 4 years, $72 million. Yuck. I know you got money to spend, but gross.
This entire free agency period has been a confusing one for Jacksonville. You bring back Cam Robinson, a player who's not that good in pass protection, and you're going to make him your starting left tackle again?
Oh, don't get me started on bad offensive tackles getting paid. I have been on the anti-Cam Robinson and anti-Donovan Smith train for at least the last 2 years. Last year when Cam Robinson got tagged, blew my mind. If you're gonna do that, If you're just going to light the money on fire, give it to a charity. Give it to the Jacksonville community. Invest. You know what? Maybe spread that money out to several positions on the roster because Jacksonville's butt cheeks and they could use help literally everywhere except quarterback. So last year I was disgusted. This year, between him and Tampa's tackle, I said it already, and it already slipped my mind.
Donovan Smith.
I hate him so much. Donovan Smith. Between those two guys, they are the bane of my existence when it comes to overpaying offensive linemen.
Yeah, Cam Robinson. I mean, Donovan Smith, at the very least, has benefited a little bit from the past couple of years, been a little bit better. But Cam Robinson, really, I don't understand. I mean, I understand that if you want Aiden Hutchinson with the first overall pick, which I think they do, because I think Aiden Hutchinson is better than any of the tackles on the board at that spot, I can understand that. But yeah, you got to do something different, though, right? Like, bring back Cam Robinson just does not feel like an answer to me. It feels like you're playing the same record on repeat, and you know what's going to happen here. It's not going to be a good year for Trevor Lawrence. Now, luckily, you do get guys back like Travis Etienne. You bring in Zay Jones. You pay him maybe a little bit too much money for just the late season run he had last year. You bring Christian Kirk on a deal that will be basically done after 2 years. You already said that. Now there's rumors they might trade Laviska Shenault Jr., who was drafted previously, because they don't know how to use him. Everything Jackson was done. I mean, they have thrown money out to the wind. They signed the player who had the most tackles in the NFL this past year. I cannot pronounce any part of his name, first or last name, so I'm not even going to try. But he's a former sixth-round pick from the Atlanta Falcons. And they paid him a lot of money, like $15 million a year, because he led the NFL in tackles last year. He can't cover. He's not a good coverage linebacker. I mean, just because you're an athletic linebacker who makes a lot of plays and always around the ball does not mean you are an effective player who deserves $15, $16 million a year. That was an overpay. You paid Brandon Scherff. I can understand why you paid him. He's one of the elite prospects in this free agent class. He's also constantly injured. This guy is going to miss 4 or 5 games a year consistently. Washington never gave him a long-term contract because of this.
Mm-hmm.
You paid him a lot of money. The deal officially was, I think, 3 years, almost $50 million, $49.5 million.
Yep.
And now that's your superstar in your offensive line. That's your offensive anchor along the line. I can't get behind it. They had some other moves. They brought in a defensive tackle from New York who was pretty good, actually. I think that's a decent signing. But yeah, overall,
Fatukasi.
Half these deals they've made do not resonate well with me.
They're just spending money just to spend it. And I again, like I said at the beginning, I get it. They have to build around Trevor Lawrence. They cannot ruin his development by being this terrible. Thankfully, they have an actual NFL coach now who's not dancing with hot blondes in bars in Ohio and isn't telling everyone in the franchise how terrible and replaceable they are and isn't being a total dick around the franchise, which is what Urban Meyer was doing and what Urban Meyer was. And just if they kept Urban Meyer any longer, I don't know how much more in the toilet things could have gotten, but it would have gotten uglier. I don't think this changes their plans for the draft, though. I know I've seen some things and I've heard some things that, bringing back Cam Robinson, signing Scherff is going to make them maybe go away from the offensive line. I don't see it. Because, again, just like with the Bengals, you've got to protect your investment. And right now, their offensive line is still a question. I don't care that they signed Scherff. I don't care that they brought back Robbins. Like you said, Robinson ain't nothing to talk about. He's nothing special. And their other offensive tackle, who is unfortunately Juwan Taylor. Yep, former Florida Gator, was also one of the worst offensive tackles in the NFL. So if they replaced him with an Evan Neal or even Ekwonu, automatic upgrade. Trevor Lawrence is happy. Huge investment in your offensive line, but very much needed. So I still think Neal and Ekwonu are still firmly in the conversation, but I think Aiden Hutchinson is going to get a little more love now than he did before, because I think they might be thinking along the same lines as other people and saying, oh, well, we brought in a guard, an all-pro guard. We franchise tagged our left tackle. We could draft a tackle in second, third, fourth round. Hey, we can find our own Dan Moore in the middle rounds and plug him in at right tackle, and we'll be fine. We just need him to be not the worst tackle in the league, and we'll be all right.
Not Jawan Taylor.
Be better than the 67th ranked offensive tackle. It's not that hard, I guess. So maybe that's what they're thinking, but I don't think this changes their plans. Now, I do want to talk about one more team before we wrap up here. I want to talk about the Chargers, man, because the Chargers have made big splash moves, and I was on the Chargers last year. And if you watch the weekly Pick'em show on Wednesdays with my good pastor Steve Brisley and myself, you'll know how often I had to defend the Chargers and defend Justin Herbert and remind Mike and others just how good this kid really is, because he's not Joe Burrow. But that's okay, because Peyton Manning isn't Tom Brady. You know, we could go down the list. Deshaun Watson's great, but he's not Russell Wilson. Russell Wilson, you know what I'm saying? Like, that's not a bad thing. You can still be elite. You could still be a top 5 quarterback in the league and not be the best. And that's okay. You could still win with that. But, dude, the moves they've made thus far, J.C. Jackson to a big fat deal, more than deserved. They traded for Khalil Mack, which was a great deal for them. And they still have their first-round pick. Are you writing Jordan Davis in pen to the Chargers in the first round at this point?
I don't know. They signed Sebastian Joseph Day, who's a pretty good interior defensive lineman from the Rams. They got someone along the defensive line. He's more of a rotational guy. Like, he's not like he's a quasi starter. Like, he started half the time. So I'm not really sure. I think the Chargers are at a point though where their entire playbook is open. They have addressed cornerback in free agency. They've added a pass rusher. They've added someone along the interior defensive line. Mm-hmm. I think we're going to want to add someone because they just cut Brian Bulaga at right tackle. They're going to want to get someone to start over Storm Norton at right tackle. That's probably going to be the focus. Okay. I don't know where they're drafting if they're going to get that opportunity. Maybe Trevor Penning's there. I have my concerns about Trevor Penning. I wouldn't really want him to be my pick at that spot in the draft, if that makes sense. But so I think you could go tackle, but if you're really thinking realistically, if the tackle situation is already played out to the point where there's no one available you would like that spot, you can do almost anything. You can trade back. You can go and maybe get wide receiver 1 or wide receiver 2 in the entire draft. Then you have your 3 top wide receivers right there. Mm-hmm. You can go and get into the corner if you want, and you'll probably get one of the top 3 or 4 corners. You can go out and maybe get Jordan Davis, like you said, or Devontae Wyatt, someone who's going to be an absolute game wrecker on the interior and completely remake this defense. Mm-hmm. You're going to have basically every opportunity to do almost anything you want in this draft to do the Chargers now because of how well you played this pre-free agent market.
And like you said, they re-signed Mike Williams, which was a huge win for them. Huge win. Now, you mentioned Penning, and I want to just touch on that real quick before we wrap things up here. You don't think Trevor Penning would be a good mid-first round pick, so you're definitely not buying the rumors that he could be a top 10 pick then. You're not buying that at all.
Well, it's the NFL, and we know sometimes front offices don't always make the best decisions. So I think it's absolutely a possibility. I think it's absolute lunacy, but it's a possibility. I don't think he deserves to be in the top 10, especially when you consider like where Rashawn Slater went last year and everything like that, compared to what I think. I understand he's got really good movement skills. I understand people are going to love to see what Trevor Penning can do athletically. Mm-hmm. I think there's just so many concerns there that he's not going to be what Rashawn Slater was in year 1. He's not going to be what Charles Cross is going to be in year 1 or any of these other guys. He's not going to be close, in my opinion, to that. I think he's more of a guy who goes somewhere between 15 to 25 is really the range I would think he would go in.
Okay.
So I'm not buying, if you're the Chargers, you want to bring him in per se, if you can find a more immediate option in free agency.
Fair enough. Now, before we wrap things up, I do want to remind you guys that the betting.net is not just sports betting. Betting.net also compares the best online casinos. So sit back, relax, and play the top online slots, poker, and table games over at betting.net. It's been a good show. I like this. We're
Yeah,
gonna talk. I think we're gonna talk more about this next week, but it might have to be a mock draft Monday come our next show because we'll know a lot more in free agency. A lot more guys will be signed. The Deshaun Watson thing will be figured out. Hopefully,
all the comp picks came out.
All the compensatory picks came out. So there's still a lot to be discussed. God damn it. I love the NFL often. Woo! So we're on Twitter. I'm on Instagram. I'm at DB Talking Sports. D as in Dan, B as in Bob. Sam, what is your handle?
Yeah, you can follow me on Twitter at Sam_Teats33. That's where I post all my latest content, all my articles and stuff like that. Check out my pin tweet. It gives you a link right to my newsletter where you can subscribe for free. All you need to do is put in your email and you get updates constantly whenever I post stuff. And I'm posting about 4 times a week at this point. So go check that out.
Love it. Keep churning out that content. Thank you guys for tuning in. We'll catch you guys next week. We'll be back hopefully on Monday at 7 o'clock. Don't be afraid to give us any questions you guys got. Questions, comments, hop in them DMs. Give us a follow. We'll follow back. We'll look forward to talking to you guys next week. Thanks for tuning in. For Sam, I'm Dan Kornhauser. He is Sam Teets. Thank you guys for